Hopefully this is recording. It is recording. Okay, so I am reading two books right now, and I'm absolutely loving both of them, and I want to talk about them. I am listening to the audiobook for The Will of the Many, and I have an e-arc of Dead Cattail Assassins, and I'm going to talk about both of them. I'm going to talk about The Will of the Many first, because that's the one I was listening to most recently, and I don't really know how to talk about this book without spoilers. I did look at the synopsis, because I might talk about things that it mentions in the synopsis, but it really doesn't give that much away. And there's so much that happened just in the first 13 chapters that I read. So this is about a orphan boy who is obviously hiding something about himself. He's not being truthful about who he is or his powers or abilities. And he gets noticed by a senator who basically blackmails him into going to this like prestigious academy, and if he does well in the academy, then he can be like a high-ranking official in this government system. The thing is, our main character doesn't want to partake in the government system at all, because basically the higher up people like leech the energy or the will off of the people that are like not ranked as high, and he doesn't want to like give up his energy or power or whatever, but he also doesn't want to be the person leeching this power. But he's like kind of going along with things for now because he thinks like that's the best course of action that he can take, but he ultimately just wants to like opt out of the system entirely. And he's also like hiding who he is, and we've gotten like clues as to his background and his backstory, and it's just like, oh my gosh, like the stakes are so high for him. And this book does not hold your hand as far as like world building. It just like dumps you in and you like kind of figure things out as you go along. But like every time it answers one of your questions, it like brings up 10 new ones. And the best example is the chapter 13 that I just read. So we met this character and she's trying to prepare Vis for the academy, and she's very kind of like ruthlessly training him. And then we find out something about her that makes us like understand why she's acting this way, but it also just opens up like 10 more questions. Like, oh my gosh, now I want to know her backstory, because like we got a little glimpse into why she's acting the way she is, but obviously there's so much more here. And yeah, it's very fast paced so far. It seems like there's a lot of like interweaving things, a lot of plotting. So like we're mostly connected to this like senator and his plotting, but we're aware that there's other people and other groups that are also like plotting their own things. And like our main character turns down one of the groups as like, no, I'm not going to take up your offer. But I'm not sure if it was a good idea or not, because like I'm not sure the guy he's with is actually like doing the right thing here. So it's very interesting. I am super excited to continue with The Will of the Many. And I'm sure there will be like many more plot details, like twists and turns along the way. And I feel like it's going to be one that's hard to talk about without spoilers, but I'm going to do my best. The other book I'm reading is Dead Cattail Assassins, which I am doing on Kindle because I have the e-arc for it. And it is so much fun. It is a short book. I think it's around 200 pages. It is basically zombie assassins. So our main character is dead, and she has chosen to serve the goddess of assassins, and basically she gets to go around and assassinate people. But like there are rules in like who they can assassinate and how, and once they accept like an assassination job, they have to carry that job out. But our main character recognizes the person that she is sent to assassinate. And reading the synopsis, like I thought she was just going to be on the run and like she's going to be on her own trying to figure this out. And that's not what happens at all. She actually just goes back to her boss and she's like, this is not supposed to happen. Fix it. Or what do we do now? And she's not afraid to team up with people and try to get help to figure this out and how to move forward, because she's basically not going to go through with the assassination, but she literally has to. I feel like the world building in this is so well done because it really feels like these characters would just be like having these conversations with each other. And it doesn't feel like they're aware of a third person observer, the reader, and they have to like, oh, we're going to tell the reader this now. It's like, no, the characters are just like telling each other things as would naturally come up. So I'm enjoying both of these stories a lot. I am off work today, but that means I need to make food today because I'm going to work all day tomorrow and I won't have time to make food. So I'm going to continue listening to The Will of the Many and make food today. And then tomorrow I'll be at work, so I probably won't be reading much. So this reading vlog will probably, continue through the next couple days as I read these books. So yeah, that's it for this clip. Welcome to the reading vlog. I video called my sister and I tried having story time with my niece, and we read Good Morning National Parks, which I thought would be fun. It's an interactive board book. So like here the sun rises, and then later in the books it goes through like different national parks. And then here for like Yellowstone, it has the geyser. And I thought it would be, fun to have story time with my niece. She did not appreciate it. I think she is just too young to really appreciate story time over a video call or something like that. My sister said she's very into, like, she wants to like grab the book and hold it and look at it closely. And she's also into like those books that have textures on it. So I sent her a couple books at Christmas time that have like the fuzzy texture or the shiny texture or like scaly texture. And apparently she really likes those books. So I'm thinking maybe whenever she's older, we can try story time again. I finished Dead Cattail Assassins, and I liked it a lot. I do have some criticisms, but I'm going to start with my positives because I feel like overall I feel very positive about the story. Dead Cattail Assassins should be a movie. And most of the reason that I say this is because the descriptions are so vivid. I'm someone who like doesn't really picture things in my head whenever I read, particularly battle scenes. I can get lost in fight scenes in books because I have no idea what's going on. And I never felt that way in Dead Cattail Assassins. I felt like I really understood what was going on. I was there with the characters. I might not actually have like an image in my mind, but I had a sense of what was going on. And I'm not really sure why that is, but something about the way this book was written really stood out vividly to me. And I feel like it's the type of story that would work really well as a movie. It could very easily be an action movie. And there are like, I'm going to say a lot of those like witty lines that we typically see in action movies now. And it's a novella, which I feel like, why are novellas not turned into movies more often? Because most of the time whenever like a book is turned into a movie, where we accept that, oh, they have to cut some things out. They can't transfer everything because then it would be like a 9-hour movie. But when you have a novella, they wouldn't have to cut as much out. So I think it'd be perfect. The other thing I really liked about Dead Cattail Assassins is there was things set up really early in the story that was just like, oh, this is a fun, quirky thing about this world that turned out being plot relevant in the end. So like some of the world building early on is not just fleshing out the world and making it feel real. This is relevant to the plot. This is going to be something that's important by the time we get to the end of the book. And I really like that. Yeah, I enjoyed my time with it, and I feel like it was a well-crafted novella, and it took exactly the number of pages it needed to tell this story. It was fun. It was fun. And that's like, it's both fun and violent. It is about these like zombie assassins. So it doesn't like shy away from like the zombiness or the violence. And particularly like we ended it on a violent note. But I feel like there's kind of like a lighthearted banter kind of going on the entire time that just kind of makes the whole story feel less serious and violent, and it's more like your action comedy, I guess. Which does bring me to one of my criticisms, which is right at the end of the book in our final scene. Our main characters are basically the center of attention in a crowded room. You could almost say it's as if they're on stage. That's like how much all eyes were on them in this moment. And yet they would whisper to each other like quips and witty lines and whatever, and act like no one else around them is like really paying any attention to them. And this is not, I'm going to say something unique about this book. This is something that kind of bothers me in other books, that it's like these two characters whisper to each other and only the other person could hear, even though these characters are in a situation where that doesn't make sense. And I kind of felt that way by the end of this book. I was like, but does that really make sense that these characters would be whispering to each other right now when everyone's like staring at them? And then the other thing about the final scene is we do have this spirit, this being from the spirit realm, talk to our main characters. And the spirit or the celestial being, the dialogue is written in like a accent or a dialect. So by that I mean like the words aren't written the way we normally write them in standard English. They're written how they would be pronounced. And the accent was thick enough that I did not understand everything that was going on. And it seemed like our main characters understood what was being said. So I sometimes just like used our main characters as context clues, because there was definitely some lines that I'm just like, I don't really know what was being said. And I understand that like writing dialogue with like an accent or a dialect can in some ways be more immersive, but I can also find it the opposite, where if I'm taking so much time out of the story to figure out what is even going on, what is even being said, it's slowing me down, it's pulling me out of the story. And I definitely felt that way because like these characters play a prominent role right at the end. And that's when I felt like I was pulled out of the story, because I was just trying to translate what these characters were saying and not getting all of it. And then like the story overall has used somewhat modern language, and definitely I'm gonna say modern humor. Just like the quippiness is like very typical of more of your action adventure comedy type story. So like I guess it makes sense that we would have some modern slang used in the book as well. The other thing that was weird is that like our celestial being is the one using the modern slang. And maybe that's just like my perception. Maybe in this world, it's like very common for the celestial beings to do that. But it just, I guess that's not my perception of like a celestial being would be more removed from time and more removed from our, I don't know, like our particular quirks, that they would seem a little bit more timeless. And that was obviously not the case for this one, even though they were very much like, oh, you guys are beneath us. Like if a celestial being is going to come and be like, you guys are beneath us, well, you know, I'm not going to like bother myself with like your trivial drama and complications and things that you're arguing about. This is like so trivial to me. Then why would these beings also pick up on the slang that these trivial beings that they don't care about are using? I don't know. Like maybe that's just me. It was an interesting choice. Um, I am reading an arc of it. So, of course, I'm saying all of this speaking about the arc. It is possible that, things could be adjusted for the final printing of the book. So, I could be wrong about all of this whenever it comes to the final printing. So, take everything I say with a grain of salt. I did like the overall plot. I really like the end. I felt like our two main characters really had some nice moments. They had some poignant moments earlier in the story that really led them to the final scene and the poignant moment between them at the end of the story. So overall, I liked the plot. I thought it was really well done. I thought, you know, it was really well done how like the setting and the world building, everything led up to those final moments, and it felt satisfying. So I'm glad I read it. I would recommend it. Maybe I was thinking if I listened to the audiobook, I might understand what the celestial being was saying better, because sometimes if I hear the accent aloud, I can understand it better than reading it. And I was like trying to read some of the lines aloud and I still wasn't getting it, but like maybe I was reading it incorrectly. So, or, just not actually pronouncing it the way phonetically as it was written. So that's Dead Cat Tail Assassins. I haven't read enough more of The Will of the Many to really have additional thoughts. So that's going to be the end of this clip, but I will come back to you with Will of the Many thoughts. So I don't want to show you that because that has my library name on it, but I am 3/4 of the way into The Will of the Many, and I will go ahead and put the book here. But I have a lot of thoughts on The Will of the Many because of how far I am into the book. It has so many layers and the plot is very fast moving. It's very much a plot driven book, and it's kind of hard to talk about because of just how many layers and how many reveals are constantly going on. There's constantly things happening that is making me go, oh my gosh, I did not expect that, or oh my gosh, that makes me recontextualize everything that happened previously. It's not to an annoying degree. In fact, like I'm really enjoying it, particularly whenever something happens that makes me like recontextualize things that happened previously. I generally like that in stories. So I am having a lot of fun with this book, but it's very, very plot driven. We also have this mystery element going on. So someone that the senator knows, he has been told has committed suicide, and the senator doesn't really believe that person would do that. So there's kind of this mystery going on of whether or not this person actually committed suicide or what happened, what were the events surrounding this character's death, and was there something else at play here? Because there's a whole lot at play in this story, and there's so many layers, and just the amount of times you're going, oh my gosh, I didn't expect that person to be connected with this other person, or I didn't expect this faction to do what they did. And it makes it so hard to talk about really anything in the story, because it's like, I don't want to give away something that is revealed later in the story. I do want to talk about a few things that are kind of bothering me in the story, but overall, I'm having a lot of fun with the story. Like, it is action-packed, it is exciting. I am enjoying my time reading this book and listening to the audiobook. I'm having a great time, and I definitely think it's going to be like one of the it's going to be ranked higher in the stories that I've read so far this year. But I do have a couple problems with it. One is our main character, Vis, is really good at absolutely everything. And that didn't really bother me until kind of this like 3/4 of the way mark through the book. And the reason it's bothering me is because Vis actually comes upon a very significant obstacle. And it's like the first time he's not actually good at something. And the thing that he is not good at is the interpersonal relationships between the political families, particularly when you have divided political factions, and dealing with that and overcoming, all of the things that are surrounding that. And Vis is not actually good at this particular circumstance because he's just met these people. He's not really familiar with them. And that was a significant problem for him. And he talks to Alkiskor, which is the senator, and he's like, hey, maybe can you do me a favor? Can you like get me on these people's good side? Or can you do something about this problem that I'm having? And Alkiskor tells him, you should be able to figure this out on your own. I'm not going to help you. And then he doesn't actually have to figure it out on his own, and he's just handed a roadmap, and it's like, this is how you overcome this. And he does have to like work to overcome like that particular thing, but he's given the roadmap, he's given the pathway. He doesn't have to figure it out on his own. And on top of that, the pathway that he's given, it's really high stakes. Like, he could still fail, but the way the stakes are written, I was like, there's absolutely no way he's failing this. And I do kind of feel that way sometimes in this book, that there's no way Vis does not overcome this thing, or the stakes aren't written to, because sometimes like a character can maybe achieve victory, but they also lose something, like maybe they'll lose a friend, or they'll lose respect of a part of someone that they wanted respect from, or there's like other stakes involved rather than just like a binary, they either pass or fail this test. And I'm starting to feel like most of the stakes involved in this story are more of just like a pass or fail stakes. So whenever Vis was like having to actually work at overcoming this challenge, he's been given the pathway and then he has to like work at doing it. I didn't feel like there was really any tension. I was just like, well, of course he's going to pass. I actually put the book down at that point because I was just like, I don't feel the tension anymore. And I will say that was like the first time in this book that that's happened, where I was just like, this is like the first test that Vis has to overcome that I just don't actually care about, because I just feel like it's so obvious what's going to happen and I don't feel the stakes or the tension. Of course, for the story, it was a good thing if he passes this test, because then we can actually progress more in the story. So like, I do think ultimately I'm fine. Like, I don't necessarily want our main character to fail always, but it is almost getting to the point that I'm like, Vis is just good at everything. Like, he's always going to succeed. And that's, I don't want stories that are that predictable. I don't want to make this sound like I'm not having a good time with the story, because I am. And then after he's accomplished that test, I have like gotten back into the story and I'm like really interested, because there are a lot of other plot lines. Like, what I'm most interested in is the political factions and their layers and their like maneuverings. That is the most interesting part. And then the mystery element, because there's some really mysterious things happening and I can't really talk about it, but oh my gosh, there is this one scene where like Vis is checking out this like mysterious ruins, and there's a whole lot that happens there that I was not expecting, and we still don't know all the answers to what is going on, but there is something very serious going on, and it's like, oh my gosh. So I do really like all of that. I want more answers. I want to know what's going on. It's just some of Vis's challenges at the academy that I'm less interested in. The other thing I just want to make note of in this book is we do have a blind character in this book, but this blind character has magic and she uses her magic. She's like a super duper duper powerful magic user and can use her magic to make herself see the world around her much better than a sighted person can see the world around them. So people have different interpretations and feelings about this particular type of representation in books, but I just think it should be noted because this is the most common type of particularly blind representation, but just fantasy and science fiction does have some problems with disability representation of making the disability just a cool feature, but not including any of the struggles that a person with that disability would have. So, like this character, she can just see better than a normal human, so she's like basically superhuman because she's blind, and it just kind of makes it like, why was this character even blind in the first place? What if she was just, you know, superhuman and had like super developed senses? Like I said, I just want to note that that is something that is present in this book. This is not a major character so far, although I feel like she's going to play a major role later, possibly in later books. I'm not really sure where the story's going, but I guess that would be my prediction. Again, I know people might have different feelings about this type of representation. I just want to make note that that is the example or the type of blind representation that is in this book. So with that, I'm going to get back to reading The Will of the Many, and I'll see you in the next clip. So I know the thing with reading vlogs is it's supposed to be less polished, but I literally already have this set up, and I would have to like move this or set up somewhere else in order to look less polished and more like I just pulled out my phone and did a reading vlog clip, and I'm doing more work to make it look like I did less work. So here we are, we're doing it in front of my normal setup. I finished The Will of the Many over a week ago, and I thought if I sat with my thoughts that I would have more clarity, because I have mixed feelings on the book, and I almost think the opposite's happening. So whenever I very first finished the book, I was like, yeah, it was fun. I have some problems, but you know, I'm still going to probably reread it, and I'll definitely read the sequel whenever it comes out. And the further I get from The Will of the Many, the more I'm just like, I might consider rereading it, and I don't know if I'll read the sequel. So I feel like my thoughts are getting less clear as for the further I get away from it. I don't know if it's less clear or if I'm just like less excited. Like honestly, I haven't really thought about the book very much since I put it down. It's not one that continues to live in my brain. And that is a huge factor for me with rating books, with, you know, considering how much I really like this book. The books that stay with me, that I think about days later, weeks later, those are the books that I rate higher. And I even had a book, it was on my top 10 books of 2023, that whenever I very first finished it, I was like, yeah, that was okay. And that book stayed with me, and it, you know, I continue to think about it occasionally. And so it moved higher on my list of like book. It ended up on my top 10 list because it was one that I just like kept thinking about and coming back to. So that is a huge factor for me. Now with this book in particular, I am very likely to read the sequel because it's a very popular book and I'll probably get FOMO. And I might reread the first book in preparation for reading the sequel, or I'm pretty sure there's going to be more than 2 books in the series. So it's very likely at some point I will reread the first book. But I'm just saying, it's not one of those books that like continues to stay with me and has me thinking about it. So that does just kind of make me question how much did I actually like the book. But it was a fun time while I was reading it. I basically finished, so I read the part 3 since the last time I recorded, and I basically had the same problems with part 3 as I was already mentioning in that clip. I think I talked very well in that clip about my overall feelings on the book. I would be enjoying the book, and then something would happen and it would be like,
oh, Vis has this challenge he has to overcome, and we already know he's going to overcome it, but we're just going to pretend that it's like really tense here for a minute. And it always just kind of like made me roll my eyes, or just like, okay, we're doing this again. But like the reveals were still very interesting. The like unsure, oh my gosh, where is the story going? Like a lot of that was still very interesting. So like I had fun while I was reading the story, but there's just some things that make me roll my eyes at. And the other thing is, so I find it funny that I was complaining about the whispered conversations that no one else overhears in Dead Cattail Assassins. So if you didn't hear that one, if you skipped it because you're not interested in that book, I will briefly go over it again here. But basically, this is something that annoys me in books in general, and then it happened in this book. So we had basically, I'm going to call it a very high stakes chess game where like one player is, they make a bet on whoever wins this chess game gets to be king and the other person's their servant. That's not the actual stakes, but you understand, like these are the types of stakes we're dealing with, like extremely high stakes bet over who wins this chess game. And everyone in the school, including school officials, are present and watching this chess game intensely. And this was actually a very interesting chess game, because the initial bet was not what Vis actually wanted. What Vis wanted was to pin the other person in a corner and then tell the other person, I'll let you out of your side of the bargain if you do this third thing for me. And unbeknownst to you, this is what I actually wanted. I didn't want the initial bet that was on the table. And that's a really interesting setup for a chess game, and I actually thought this was one of the better situations where we have these stakes, and the stakes are not just win or lose in this situation, like we have other stakes surrounding it. So this was like, I was really interested in this chess game until literally everyone in the school was like surrounding them, watching them play this game. And then our characters decide to have a whispered conversation, and that's where Vis is like, hey, I'll let you out of your side of the bargain if you do this other thing for me. And no one, not the school officials, not the other students, no one notices that they are having this whispered conversation. And I just don't believe that there are scenarios where like all the eyes are on these people that no one notices when those people have whispered conversations. So same thing happened in Dead Cattail Assassins, except that one was more like they were just like whispering jokes or quips to each other. So that one annoyed me actually less than this particular one. It's probably a me thing, but it's so like this is something I've noticed in books before, and I'm just like, why does this keep coming up? And then finally, the big reveal at the end of this book, which I did know this book ends on a cliffhanger, and I did expect, there's going to be like some massive reveal at the end of this book, because there's tons of reveals throughout the book. And they were fun. They were fun reveals. And the big reveal at the end of this book does make it so if you reread this book, you do have to like recontextualize a lot of things that happened previously, and I'm really interested in that. But it's a trope that I'm kind of tired of. So I think that contributes to, it's not bad. It's just me personally, I'm kind of tired of this trope. And that's why I can't talk about the trope, because then it's spoilers. But I did wonder, because I was like, I did not see this coming at all whatsoever. So it makes me wonder, how much was there setup or foreshadowing for this? And then how much was there setup or foreshadowing for other reveals in the story? And are we doing reveals more for like shock factor, the jaw dropping, oh my gosh, I didn't even see that coming? Or are we doing reveals that are like actually, there's stuff woven in there that's like setting up this reveal coming? And I would have to reread it to actually be able to answer that. But thinking back, I'm having my doubts of like how much there was foreshadowing, particularly for the big reveal at the end. And that also pushes this book down my favorites a little bit, just because I am someone who really likes things that are set up, and I think they make the best rereads, because you can go back and go, oh, it was there all along, I just missed it. Those are the best. And I love a good setup and payoff, and a good, well foreshadowed things that you're still able to miss the foreshadowing. And sometimes it's fun to realize, oh my gosh, I think it's foreshadowing this. Is that actually going to happen? Like, it can be fun. It can increase anticipation. So yeah, all of that is I enjoyed the book. I'll probably reread it. I'll probably read the sequel, but my feelings are just kind of mixed. And maybe I have to reread it before I solidify my feelings more. So that's my thoughts on The Will of the Many. If you've read either of these books or you want to continue discussing them, leave me a comment, and I hope to see you in another video. Happy reading!